Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Okay, I lied. I forgot that this little Harveyanum needs a repot. When I planted those keikis is actually quite a while ago when the mother plant keeled over, which has ceased to be now. So this is all I've got left. I did let it bloom. It's a very old cane it bloomed on. I doubt if it's going to sap the strength of the plant. But that needs, but I'm not filming that, that's a standard repot. Take it out of one and put it in another. However, this one, been waiting for quite a long time for these funny little things down at the base of the pseudobulbs to turn into flower spikes. And these do not look like flower spikes to me, they look like new growths. And as such, this is now an ideal time to get this out of the pot. Reason number one. And reason number two, I want to treat this one different this time. I've got a feeling that this might be lots of plants that are all stuck in the same pot. So that's if it's going to come out at all. The fact that it won't come out implies it's got a good root system underneath it, which is good on these. Right. Now the first thing I need to stop and think about, but not yet, not this time of year, is why didn't this bloom? It grew well last year, why didn't it bloom? So, like I've always said, repeating the same thing over and over again is highly likely to get the same results. So there's no point in me treating this the same through autumn and winter, because the result will probably be exactly the same, no bloom. So I need to treat this differently. Now I can't get it any colder. What I could do is increase the light level dramatically during the winter, because this lived down on the floor through the winter months. It was quite near the glass, but are its roots actually any good? I think they are. I mean, they are hairy roots at the best. That is their way. But I have got a lot of new growths coming at the moment, and this is where new roots come from, and I want those into new media. This has been in its pot quite a long time now, so I mean it could even be that it wasn't happy with the media starting to go, and that's why it didn't bloom. There could be many flipping reasons. I believe this bloomed for the first time last year, so I was expecting more from it this spring, because it grew that much better. Right, I will, as I suspect this is quite a few growths, but being a coelogeny, they do that, yeah? All of these old bulbs down here have now served their purpose. I've got some new roots coming, but again that's near the front end of this long piece of rhizome, so even if that isn't a separate piece, it will be soon. So this is a matter of rejuvenation, I think, here. It's finding out how many pieces I've got. It could all be one plant, it is possible, and that I wound it round when I potted it to get it all in the pot. That's possible. Yeah, there are some signs of some new roots in places that are good. But these are drinkers in the growing season. They need to stay moist. They drink quite heavily to grow nice big fat bulbs and nice swollen bulbs, and not lose the plumpness of the older bulbs. The new growths will drain the old bulbs if they don't get enough feed and water during that growth period, so you've got to watch these. They're quite easy to let go downhill, if you know what I mean. See, that piece there appears to be joined, but there's no rhizome there, so it's got to be just tangled roots, hasn't it? There's no rhizome in that gap there, so it's just, yeah, it's just tangled roots, which is good. So we've got a piece there in the sink, washing up. I'll do that in a minute. That's obviously a separate piece. That will be trimmed. I'll take some of the back of that off, but it's got a nice new lead. New roots will come from here, and they'll be helped by getting the sheaths out of the way. Yeah, that'll get some moisture around the base where the roots come from. So that's another piece. What else have we got here? So I'm looking for where the new growths are. There's a nice new growth there. that piece is staying, whether it's one piece or not, it's staying as one. I've got signs of new roots coming in places, so that could stay as it is. Just give the root base a bit of a clean up, and got to go careful. You see, if I looked at that bulb there and thought, oh, that's an old bulb, I'll cut that off, the rhizome could be what's holding this part of the plant on. So you try and cut a bulb off and you end up separating a chunk of the plant. So you've got to sort of go careful with these, and I think that can just stay as a piece. I'll just wiggle it around so that the new growths are in a place where they can get down into some media. They will extend roots if they grow high. Yeah, they will drop their roots down and find media. But what I don't want with this is bulbs growing out over the edge of the pot and new roots going into nothing. These do not like having aerial roots. They need their roots in something. They just can't drink enough if they've got aerial roots. If there's a predominance of aerial roots, they like to be in media. So that can stay as a single piece. So yeah, a few pieces. I'll get those cleaned up under the tap, and we can say goodbye to that because it certainly ain't going back in there. And I'll be back when I've had a tidy up. I'm only going to film that one. The little Harveyanum is just take it out, clean it up, put it in a new pot. Seen enough of those, but this one's going to get treated a bit different. I'll be back. Okay, I'm going to try the plant in one of these. Several reasons. One, wider than any pot I've got, and two, shallow. So it should suit this sort of root system a lot better than a deep pot, which I would need to try and accommodate the size of the plant. So this will get a moss lining as thin as I can get it. I don't want this taking up the space that the roots ought to be in, so it's going to be just a very, very thin layer, and the only reason it's getting that is to hold the media in place. It'll also help keep the media ball moist, because the moss will stay moist, and the moss will tell me when it's starting to get dry. Oh, is it going to gobble the moss, isn't it? Yes, I've got to have a think about this plant as a non-bloomer this year when it has bloomed before, when it actually put on some good growth last year. I was expecting a reasonable blooming this year and got nothing, not a light. So blooms on this are initiated during the winter. Yeah, so growth summer into autumn, feed and water well, all that sort of stuff, and build up the strength in the plant for blooming. But I might have to do a little bit of research, because obviously something triggers that blooming that I didn't do. Now it could be that it was too wet and it needed to be a lot drier. It could be that it dried out too much. But I'll look into it. That's all I can say at the moment. Right, so that's just a light covering to stop the media falling out the holes. That's all it's for. I'm pressing it against the sides now to get as much of a hole in the middle as I possibly can, so I've got as much root space as possible. Now I've got a decision now. I don't want this staying soggy if during the winter time it needs to dry off. I need it to dry. So at the moment I'm going to go for a mix of small and medium bark. So that allows a fair bit of air around, and it's a sort of root system that needs to touch. It's not one of those that will grow in great big air gaps. So right, I've got pieces. Obviously got that little piece there which I just took the back end off of. Move that over there a bit. Let's see what's going on here. And then I've got another smaller piece here. But I don't want to take the back end off of that. That is a piece in itself. I mean, that would make a good plant for somebody else. You know, it's got a growing point. This is what I meant about growths. You know, these are previous year's bulbs. You know, my latest growths have got some really good bulbs on them and some good sized leaves, but no blooms. So that's going to be down to what happened in the winter. Well, that's those two pieces. We'll find a gap to put them in. And then this is the big piece. And This is going right in the middle basically, because the new growths are coming out mainly around the edge. Now that does leave a couple of little old bulbs on. I'm sure I could happily take that one off, but I don't want to break a rhizome. It's not worth the risk for the amount of space that little old bulb takes up. It's just not worth the hassle. So I'm just going to sit that in the middle at the moment and see what happens. Not adding any media yet. I'm just trying to position stuff. Now this one's got a nice big fat new growth, so that one's going to go there, because that part of that plant that I've just put in has no new growth in that area. So that now makes up for it and puts a new growth in that area of the pot. Because if the new growths that are coming on now are potentially next year's blooms, so spreading them around as best I can should spread the blooms around as well. And this one's going to be a bit of a pain to get in. Yeah, those two back bulbs have got no roots on them at all, and they're going to make my life difficult trying to get them in there, so they are going to come off. So you know me, whenever I see a rhizome. Right, we get as many of those roots tucked in under the plant as I can. And I know that looks daft, pointing the new growth into the middle of the plant, but it's going to extend. Wherever there's a new growth, it's going to try and push outwards from that point. And these will stack. They will grow pseudo bulbs on top of pseudo bulbs and push the roots down in the gaps and form like a mound. They will also spread out sideways, so I'm trying to do a bit of both and encourage it to stay in the pot. Now all I need to do now is trickle this in without burying the bulbs. Don't need this deep in the pot, don't need it deep in media. It's sat on the media. This is just to settle it in, really. I'll try and get some in underneath if I can. But most of this is just going to trickle down between the bulbs into the gaps. And as I water it, they will trickle down more and more as time goes on. They'll gradually find their gaps and make their way down into the gaps. Try not to bury any bulbs. But the oldest little bulbs don't matter that much. I've seen these growing in huge heaps, you know, and down in underneath there are the old bulbs. Well, they don't seem to do any harm. You know, they don't seem to rot or kill the plant or anything like that. It just seems to be the way it likes to grow. It piles itself upwards. I don't think this is going to get much more than that, quite honestly. It's a layer underneath, and most of the roots were placed sitting on that, so they've got contact. They'll go straight down in. And as I say, as I water this, it will settle itself in place, slowly but surely. Trying to make sure I haven't got too many bulbs buried. Right, let's have a look. I've done that without the light on as well. I'll electronically enhance it. Right, that's not too bad. I think that will do. I'm sure at some point I will lose a little bit of media out of the sides. I think actually I'll try and get a little bit more moss around that bit. Like I said, if it does try and head out of the pot, any growth that comes into contact with something will probably root, and that may stop it going too far away from the pot. And also with a pot like this, if it does manage to escape and push a bulb out, when the roots come down, they should sense the moisture of the moss close by and head towards it. In theory, I mean, roots will always push for moisture. If they can, they will. If there's none there, they can't. Which leaves you with aerial roots, which is not always the best. Some plants it's no problem, others you're losing some of your root system because they just won't hydrate as well as if they were in a pot, you know, in something or on a mount or something like this. I mean, this would grow on a mount, you know, it would. But it would be quite a clumsy mount to try and accommodate. So it's going in a pot. So I'm just building up the sides with the moss. That'll help hold the media in when I water, and hopefully if any new growths do head outwards, they'll hit that and go upwards and push their roots down into the moss, which then gets down into the pot. That's my theory. We'll have to wait and see if it works, won't we? Now all I got to do is try and work out why you didn't bloom. There's got to be a reason. And at the moment, I won't say I'm at a loss, I have ideas, but I'll go and have a look round at the information that's available and see if there's anything specific that this thing needs to trigger blooms. And it could just be the winter temperature. It might even be that my low in the winter isn't low enough, in which case there's nothing I can do. And if that ends up being the answer and there's nothing I can do, then this will be for somebody else. There's no point in keeping it if I'm never going to get it to bloom well. As I say, it did bloom once. I think it was a single spike. Obviously I've got a picture of a bloom in my notes, so it must have bloomed at some point. Sorry I'm off camera, but I'm just clearing up as I go here. Anyway, so that's that one. It's quite nicely in place. Media down in amongst the bulbs. They don't mind being partially buried, these. Oh, I can see a gap there. Get a bit more down in there. Yeah, they don't mind the media coming part way up the bulbs, as opposed to some things that like to be sitting on the media. These are quite happy to have the base of the bulbs actually in the media, as long as it's not all soggy, you know, and they stay wet and rot. Anyway, we'll see how that does now, and we'll just keep our eye on those new growths, see how they progress. They look good and strong, quite honestly. You know, from memory, the last time this happened, these look like good strong growths and should produce some nice fat bulbs. I wonder when I repot it. I wonder if it was the root disturbance that stopped it blooming this spring. Anyway, I'll look into it, and obviously I've got a long time to wait. The thing to do with this now is grow it. You know, I'm not interested in blooms at this time of year. If it's going to bloom, it's normally sort of late winter into spring. Coleogeny cristata. This is actually a variety. This is Lemoniana, so it's not actually the true cristata. It's a named variety of, often thought to affect the colouring, but it doesn't really. The Lemoniana was that it was a Mr. Lemon that discovered it and named it, so it's got nothing to do with the colour. But it is a variety. It doesn't come out the same as other cristatas. Anyway, it's not a bad plant, and we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 strong new growths coming out there. Let's actually count them. We've got 1 here, 2, 3, so 3 over that side, 4, 5, 6 I can see. 6 strong new growths coming out on there, which in theory should be 6 blooming spikes. And the fact that this will be this year's main growths doesn't mean it won't extend and produce another bulb on the end of these growths by the end of the season. We shall see. Anyway, that's that one done. I missed that on the list, as I said, because it was on hold. I was thinking that the funny little things growing out at the base of the bulbs might well be flower spikes, but they weren't. So anyway, that's that one done. See you next time. Just tagged on the end. What I actually did when I took the Dendrobium harveyanum out of the pot, it turned out it was 2 keikis. So you got the 2 original canes plus last year's growth that each one put on, but it was 2 separate plants. And I thought, well, as I lost the mother plant, let's hedge our bets and put 1 bit on a mount and 1 bit in a pot. So it's got 2 chances now, 1 in a pot and 1 on a mount, and we'll see what, be just my luck if they both grow. But anyway, that's what I did with the harveyanum. See you next time.